orchard, and he's looking around, he's trying to find Juliet. And he's going to come across her, and she's going to be on her balcony, just kind of like looking at the stars, okay? And he is going to express some of his feelings. So what we're going to see in this scene is a couple of soliloquies. Okay, and we talked about soliloquy when we did our guided notes at the beginning of this whole play. Does anybody remember what a soliloquy might be? It has been a while, so it's okay if you don't. But so this is going to be one character saying, that's not spelling. One character saying their thoughts or feelings. Okay, and we use soliloquies in plays because we don't have a narrator who can like just tell us what people are thinking or feeling. So first Romeo will have a soliloquy and then Juliet will, okay? Keep in mind that the character is either alone on stage or thinks that they are alone. So even though Romeo is looking at Juliet, she can't hear what he's saying, okay? And vice versa. When Juliet starts speaking, she does not know that Romeo is there, okay? So like, for visualization's sake, I really can't draw, but here's Juliet on her balcony. That's a balcony. Here she is, right? And here's like all the trees of their orchard and everything, right? And so like Romeo's like over here somewhere, not really like up in her face, okay? So he just sees her. She can't hear him. He can hear her, but she's not aware that he's there, at least at first. Eventually she will be, but to start out with, she just thinks that she's alone, okay? So Romeo is really just going to be talking about his feelings for Juliet, talking about her beauty. There's a ton of figurative language in here, so we'll kind of break some of that down after he talks about it. So we'll kind of just go to the bottom where there's like the letter B in your text. So we'll go through that part and then we'll stop and kind of talk about some of the figurative language that we see. Maybe.
Scene 2. Capulet's orchard.
He jests at scars that never felt a wound. And soft. What light through yonder window breaks? It is the east, and Juliet is the sun. Arise, fair sun, and kill the envious moon, who is already sick and pale with grief, that thou, her maid, art far more fair than she. Be not her maid, since she is envious? Her vestal livery is but sick and green, and none but fools do wear it. Cast it off. It is my lady. Oh, it is my love. Oh, that she knew she were. She speaks, yet she says nothing. What of that? Her eye discourses, I will answer it. I am too bold. 'Tis not to me she speaks. To the fairest stars in all the heaven, having some business, do entreat her eyes to twinkle in their spheres till they return. What if her eyes were there, they in her head? The brightness of her cheek would shame those stars as daylight doth a lamp. Her eyes in heaven would through the airy region stream so bright that birds would sing and think it were not night. See how she leans her cheek upon her hand. Oh, that I were a glove upon that hand, that I might touch that cheek.
Okay, so we'll stop right there. Okay, so we've got tons of figurative language here. Basically, all he's doing is just describing how beautiful she is, talking about how much he loves her. So let's kind of break down and see where we can find some of this figurative language. What are some metaphors that he uses? There's a few. Remember, metaphor compares two unlike things, but it does not use like or as. Mm-hmm. Yep. Juliet is the sun, right there in line 2 and 3. What light through yonder window breaks? It is the east, and Juliet is the sun. So again, he's going back to this idea of like her shining and like her being like bright in the darkness. That's your first question on your study guide. Juliet is the sun. Okay. What's another one? That's the most obvious one, so.
The moon wasn't like the moonlight before the birds.
Which part? Oh, the birds. Okay, let's see. The brightness of her cheek would shame those stars as daylight of a lamp, her eyes in heaven. Through the air, and so bright that birds would sing and think it were not night. Yeah, I mean, he's still kind of comparing her eyes to being like so bright. I actually think that that's like an extension of the simile that's in line 19. The brightness of her cheek would shame those stars as daylight doth a lamp. So I think it's kind of like more of an extension of that simile maybe than something else on its own. Any other ideas? In line 24, he says, oh, that I were a glove upon that hand, that I might touch that cheek. So he's comparing himself to a glove that would be on her hand, saying that he wishes that he could be like a glove on her hand because then he would be able to touch her cheek, right? So he'd be able to touch her. What about personification? Personifications where we give a human trait to something that is not human. So if we look in line 4, arise, fair sun, and kill the envious moon, who is already sick and pale with grief. What does it mean to be envious? Jealous. Is the moon capable of being jealous? No. So that is personification, right? So he has already used a metaphor to describe Juliet as the sun, and now he's personifying the moon as being sort of like almost like another woman, right? Who's jealous of Juliet's beauty, right? Jealous of the sun's beauty. Who is already sick and pale with grief that thou, her maid, art far more fair than she. So he's saying that like Juliet, the sun, is more beautiful than the moon. Okay. You see in lines like 13 and 14, he's sort of like thinking about saying something to her and then deciding not to. And then like, maybe I should say, right, he says, my eye discourses, I will answer it. And then he's like, no, I'm too bold. It is not to me she speaks. So he like wants to say something to her, but he's afraid. Okay, so she still doesn't know that he's there. Even though he says I, me, or she says I, me in line 26, he still doesn't, or she still doesn't know that he is there. Sorry. Okay. In this next part, Romeo is going to continue to talk. Juliet is going to start talking, but keep in mind that she doesn't know that he's there. Okay. Like you have to keep that in your head. She is not talking to him at this point. She is using this, right? She's doing a soliloquy, performing a soliloquy. So she's just expressing her thoughts and feelings out loud. He just happens to be overhearing her.
She speaks. Oh, speak again, bright angel. For thou art as glorious to this night, being o'er my head, as is a winged messenger of heaven, and to the white upturned wondering eyes of mortals that fall back to gaze on him, when he bestrides the lazy pacing clouds and sails upon the bosom of the air.
Oh, Romeo, Romeo, wherefore art thou Romeo? Deny thy father and refuse thy name. Or if thou wilt not, be but sworn my love, and I'll no longer be a Capulet.
Shall I hear more, or shall I speak of this?
'Tis but thy name that is my enemy. Thou art thyself, though not a Montague. What's Montague? It is nor hand, nor foot, nor arm, nor face, nor any other part belonging to a man. Oh, be some other name. What's in a name? That which we call a rose by any other name would smell as sweet. So Romeo would, were he not Romeo called. Retain that dear perfection which he owes without that title. Romeo, doff thy name, and for that name which is no part of thee, take all myself.
Okay, we'll stop there. Okay, we see another metaphor at the bottom of page 1067 when he says, speak again, bright angel. Okay, so this is more of like an implied metaphor. He's not saying Juliet is a bright angel, but he's calling her bright angel. So he's comparing her to an angel. It's more implied than explicit in that sense. Okay, so then Juliet chimes in here. Romeo, Romeo, wherefore art thou Romeo? Wherefore does not mean where. Okay, so Juliet is not up there saying like, oh, where are you, Romeo? I wish you were here. And then he like magically shows up. That's not what wherefore means. Okay, in your footnote, wherefore means why. Okay, so she's saying, Romeo, Romeo, why are you Romeo, right? Like, why do you have to be a Montague? This makes things very complicated, right? If he was anyone else, it would be very easy for her to be in love with him, but he's a Montague, so that's a problem for her. She says, deny thy father and refuse thy name. So she's saying, like, give up your family, right? Like, if only you weren't a Montague. Or if thou wilt not, be but sworn my love, and I'll no longer be a Capulet. So she says, like, if you're not willing to, like, forget your family name, swear you love me, and I will give up my family name. Like, I'll give up my family. Okay? Romeo says, shall I hear more, or shall I speak at this? And then Juliet continues on, talking here about how a name is kind of like meaningless, right? She says, a rose by any other name would smell as sweet. So even if a rose was called like, I don't know, dirt or something, it would still smell nice, right? So names basically they're meaningless. They don't have anything to do with the actual person. And she kind of is asking Romeo to get rid of his name, right? Without that title, Romeo, doff thy name, and for that name, which is no part of thee, take all myself. So your second question is, how does Romeo find out how Juliet feels about him? So how does he find out? Good, he overhears her, okay? So she's probably being a lot more open here than she would have been if she knew he was listening, right? Especially at this time, like, you know, women like had very kind of like strict rules about like courtship and honor and stuff like that. So it's pretty unlikely that she would have said this directly to his face, especially after having just met for like, what, 5 minutes or whatever it was, okay? All right, so at this point, Romeo decides that he's heard enough and he's gonna jump out and talk to her, okay? And at first she doesn't know who it is, okay? It's very dark. There's no like street lights or house lights like there were today. So at first she doesn't know who it is, and then she's gonna kind of figure it out, okay?
Take thee at thy word. Call me with love, and I'll be new baptized. Henceforth, I never will be Romeo.
What man art thou that thus bescreened in night so stumblest on my counsel?
By a name I know not how to tell thee who I am. My name, dear saint, is hateful to myself because it is an enemy to thee. Had I it written, I would tear the word.
My ears have yet not drunk 100 words of that tongue's utterance, yet I know the sound. Art thou not Romeo, and a Montague?
Neither, fair saint, have I heard thee this life.
How camest thou hither? Tell me, and wherefore? The orchard walls are high and hard to climb, and the place death, considering who thou art, if any of my kinsmen find thee here.
With love's like wings did I overperch these walls, for stony limits cannot hold love out. And what love can do, that dares love attempt, therefore thy kinsmen are no let to me.
If they do see thee, they will murder thee.
There lies more peril in thine eye than 20 of their swords. Look thou but sweet, and I am proof against their enmity.
I would not for the world they saw thee here.
I have night's cloak to hide me from their sight, and but thou love me, let them find me here. My life were better ended by their hate than death prorogued wanting of thy love.
Okay, we'll stop there. All right, so Romeo jumps out and he's like, just tell me you love me and I'll be new baptized, right? So he means like, I'll take a new name. I won't be Romeo. And at first, like I said, she doesn't know that it's him. We have some more personification here in line 57. My ears have not yet drunk 100 words of that tongue's utterance, yet I know the sound. Okay, well, your ears are just part of your body. They can't drink something, right? That's personification. But yeah, she's saying that she recognizes his voice and asks if he is truly a Montague. He says, neither, fair saint, if either thee dislike. So he's like, if you don't want me to be a Montague, I won't be a Montague, right? He'll do anything for her. She asks how he got there, and he says, with love's light wings did I o'erperch these walls. So like love lifted me over the walls. What kind of figurative language is that? Personification. Yeah, I heard somebody say it. Okay. So he's saying that like love lifted him or, you know, helped him climb over the wall. Well, love can't do that. Love doesn't have arms or anything. Okay, also a little bit of hyperbole here for stony limits cannot hold love out. Romeo's going to be using quite a bit of hyperbole here in this little section because he's kind of saying that like, she says like, hey, if a Capulet sees you, they're going to kill you, right? And he's basically like, your love will protect me. Even if they find me, it would be better for me to die with their hate than like to live without your love or something like that, right? So he's Romeo. He's over emotional. He jumps in, you know, without thinking. I'm really going for it here. Okay, so in this next section, she's going to ask again about like how he got there. And then she's going to talk about how she's embarrassed that he heard her say all of these things.
By whose direction foundst thou out this place?
By love that first did prompt me to inquire. He lent me counsel, and I lent him eyes. I am no pilot, yet wert thou as far as that vast shore washed with the farthest sea, I would adventure for such merchandise.
Thou knowest the mask of night is on my face, else would a maiden blush repaint my cheek for that which thou hast heard me speak tonight. Fain would I dwell on form, fain deny what I have spoke, but farewell compliment. Dost thou love me? I know thou wilt say aye, and I will take thy word. Yet if thou swearest, thou mayst prove false. At lovers' perjuries they say Jove laughs. O gentle Romeo, if thou dost love, pronounce it faithfully. Or if thou thinkst I am too quickly won, I'll frown and be perverse, and say thee nay, so thou wilt woo, but else not for the world. In truth, fair Montague, I am too fond, and therefore thou mayst think my havior light. But trust me, gentlemen, I'll prove more true than those that have more cunning to be strange. I should have been more strange, I must confess, but that thou overheardst ere I was ware my true love's passion. Therefore pardon me, and not impute this yielding to light love which the dark night hath so discovered.
Okay, so Juliet here says that Blah, blah, blah. Thou knowest the mask of night is on my face, else would a maiden blush to paint my cheek for that which thou hast heard me speak tonight. So she's saying that she's embarrassed, right? Because he overheard her. Then she kind of asks if he loves her in line 90. She says, I know thou wilt say I, and I will take thy word. Yet if thou, oh my gosh, I cannot talk. Yet if thou swearest, thou mayest prove false. So she's like asking, like, do you love me? And then in line 95, she kind of like, she doesn't want him to think that like she's insincere or that like her love isn't true. She says, if thou thinkst I am too quickly won, I'll frown and be perverse and say thee nay. So she's like, if you think that like I'm too like easily won over, like I can pretend like I don't love you. But then she says, in truth, fair Montague, I am too fond, and therefore thou mayst think my behavior light. But trust me, gentlemen, I'll prove more true than those that have more cunning to be strange. So she's basically saying, like, don't think that I'm too outspoken, right? Because again, like at this, you just have to think about like this time period. Like girls would not really like normally say these kind of things, especially to someone that they like barely knew. So she doesn't want him to think that like she's too outspoken or like too, you know, kind of like too easy basically, right? But then she says that like she'll be true to him no matter what, basically, okay? Okay, let's try to go a little bit more. I don't know that we'll finish the whole scene, but here we go.
Lady, by yonder blessed moon I swear that tips with silver all these fruit tree tops.
Oh, swear not by the moon, the inconstant moon that monthly changes in her circled orb, lest that thy love prove likewise variable.
What shall I swear by?
Do not swear at all. Or if thou wilt, swear by thy gracious self, which is the God of my idolatry, and I'll believe thee.
In my heart's dear love.
Well, do not swear. Although I joy in thee, I have no joy of this contract tonight. It is too rash, too unadvised, too sudden, too like the lightning which doth cease to be ere one can say it lightens. Sweet, good night. This bud of love by summer's ripening breath may prove a beauteous flower when next we meet. Good night. Good night. Has sweet repose and rest come to thy heart as that within my breast?
Okay, so she's basically asked him, do you love me, right? And at the top of page 1070, he's like, by the moon, I swear. And she stops him. She says, oh, swear not by the moon, the inconstant moon that monthly changes in her circled orb, lest that thy love prove likewise variable. So why doesn't she want him to swear by the moon? Yeah, good, it changes, right? Sometimes it's full, sometimes it's gone, sometimes it's just a little bit, sometimes it's half, right? You don't want somebody to love you like that, right? You want them to be constant. Okay, so she doesn't want him to swear by the moon. It changes all the time, and she doesn't want her love to change all the time. Okay. And then she kind of says, like, she kind of takes a step back, basically. Okay, in line 117, she says, I have no joy of this contract tonight. So she's basically like, I'm concerned about this declaration of love, right? Like, it's too fast, too rash, too unadvised, too sudden, too like the lightning which doth cease to be ere one can say it lightens. Okay, so she's kind of trying to say, like, let's just call it a night, like, and, you know, this bud of love by summer's ripening breath may prove a beauteous flower when next we meet, okay? So she's kind of saying, like, let's just leave it here and we'll meet, you know, the next time we meet, our love will continue. Now we know, obviously, they are from different families, so, like, the possibility of them getting to meet after this is not great, okay? All right, so we're gonna stop there for today, and we will pick up there next week on Monday, okay? So you should have scene 1, number 1 and 2, and your summary, and then for scene 2, number 1, 2, and 3, okay?